I know you all must think, wow, Leah's Sunday mornings must be full of glitz and glamour. Well, this is what my Sunday mornings look like. Got my coffee, got my breakfast today. It's stew. I'm very much a leftover lady when it comes to breakfast because I'm lazy. And I go over my notes. It's pretty great. I also answer some emails. Ta-da! I'm glad we got to have that intimate moment and y'all got to see the real me, the clean me, the freshly showered, intimately engulfed in her stew me. I also spilled a little bit after I talked with you guys. Got on my sweater. Oh well. Okay, well, good morning. So good to see all of you. Also, it's probably afternoon and I'm not actually seeing you. It's fine. I'll say hello in the comment section right now. Cool. So I had a great Christmas. I really hope you all did too. Whether you were able to make it to the drive-in Christmas Eve service, go through the drive-through to get your little candy bag thing, whatever it was. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope that you had so much fun. I know that I did. My family and I did a movie day. It was so relaxing and so nice, and just getting to spend time with them because my brother, he works night shifts, so he didn't work that day, so we got to spend some time together. It was beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So today we are going to be talking about moments ending. So this is the last Sunday of 2020, which is Beyonders. Literally, New Year's is this week. We get to dash into 2021, even though no one's really dashing anywhere. But I'm excited because today we're going to be talking about times that may seem a little hard, like 2020, and talking about when those times come to an end. What do we do? What do we do with the sadness or just processing what this year brought to us, good and bad, that kind of balance? What do we do with that? And I'm excited because we're going back into the Old Testament. It's been a while since we've been there, so I'm stoked that we're going back. And it's just going to be beautiful. We do have some announcements today. Unfortunately, Bia couldn't be here today. So my cousin, who looks like me, it's kind of crazy. Her name is Cindy. She's going to do an announcement. So thanks, Cindy. Hello, my name is Cindy. I am Aaliyah's cousin. The announcements this week are there is still no group this Wednesday. We will not be meeting on a Zoom or in person. We are looking forward to next Wednesday when we will get back together. But yes, Happy New Year. But remember that on Sunday we still have Zoom after this airs on the YouTube at the 1 o'clock, and then it's just joy. Happy New Year from Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. Kisses. So Ecclesiastes is a book that is pretty honest. It's one that is not always used because it's not always like super chipper and joyful and happiness and joy and all that stuff. But the biggest thing about this book that really I think is important, especially as we end 2020, if that makes sense, it's one of those years where a lot of things have come up. I mean, we had a global pandemic. We started talking about the environment more. It was kind of a time warp for me. I was reading something that was like recapping everything that's happened in 2020. One of the things, the Australian bushfires, where it like burned a huge portion of Australia. That was only in January. It hasn't even been a year yet since that happened. So things like that, where we've talked about the earth. How do we better care for the earth? We've talked about what does it mean to have a global pandemic? Oof, the worst. And then also we've talked about Black Lives Matter. How do we care for people who don't look like us, who are oppressed? And how do we do that all within the context of Jesus? What would Jesus do in these moments? And therefore, how do we move forward in these moments? And I think that is very appropriate as we close out the chapter of 2020. We stop writing 2020 on all of our homework sheets. We start writing 21 on everything. The biggest thing for me is a lot of these things aren't going away tomorrow. They're not even going to go away on Thursday when we start getting ready to celebrate a new year. All of these things are things that I especially feel like we shouldn't be forgetting. We shouldn't forget the fact that the earth needs us to take care of it. That was literally our purpose in creation, was to tend to the earth. So how do we as Christians tend to the earth better? Then when it comes to the pandemic, the question was, how do we care for each other and how do we protect one another? Well, when we go into 2021, we should continue to think that way because the pandemic's not over yet. But also, even after the pandemic ends, how do we continue to care for one another? How do we continue to show love and compassion to each other? And then when it comes to Black Lives Matter, how do we make sure that the oppression of brothers and sisters that don't look like us, how do we share our privilege with them? How do we hold people in power accountable for the decisions they make that harm other oppressed people? So that's the idea of this whole concept of like when God closes one door, God opens another door. So that's why that beginning part of this passage is beautiful, is he made everything beautiful in its time. When you look at a rose, roses bloom, right? So, boop. But it starts off as nothing. And then the plant continues to grow and it pushes out a little bud. So it's super small. And I don't know if you all have ever peeled back a rose or a bud in general. If you've ever peeled back the green leaves and you've looked inside, the petals are there, but they haven't bloomed yet. The flower's not ready to open up. So even though this little bud is so cute, it's not its full potential of beauty yet. So that's where God goes, not yet. Don't open it yet. And slowly as days go by, slowly you see the bud opening and then you blink. Well, it feels like you blink and suddenly the flowers open and it's gorgeous and it's so beautiful. We have roses in our front yard and I love watching it, where literally you get to watch from beginning to end this beautiful evolution of this flower. Well, we also see that everything has its beautiful timing, and that's what God does. Is God waits for that perfect moment, for that situation, that object, that person, that plant to thrive. When is it most beautiful? And that's when God places them there, that's when God places a moment to show the love of God somewhere. And so he has set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. We've talked about this idea of God being omniscient before. So that means that God knows everything. So the little things, God knows your favorite color, how many hairs are on your head, what you ate for breakfast, what you're doing right now. Are you actually watching the sermon? Are you playing Roblox? Are you looking on other parts of YouTube? God knows all that. And so it's saying that in those moments that God knows the human heart, but God also knows everything from beginning to end. God knows what's happened, what is happening, and what will happen. And that's the beauty of this, is that God knows the timing and when that pinnacle moment of sharing love or caring for a stranger comes into play. And so then we see in verse 12, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. So we are given such a short time within this huge timeline of life. How are we going to make our portion count? How are we going to make that portion significant on the eternity timeline? So how are we going to care for one another? How are we going to share the gospel of Jesus with others? How are we going to bring hope to people? What are we going to do in order to not only share the gospel with others, but truly believe the gospel for ourselves? To take our relationship with Christ into our own hands and not live through our parents' faith, our cousins' faith, our siblings' faith, your youth pastor's faith. How do you make that your own? I know that there is nothing better for people to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. So toil is the hard part in this passage. To toil means to work hard, to be stressed out, strain, lots of effort. It's usually like associated with things that are not fun. Like to have something that's a toil, it's a challenge. So throughout life, we may have trials and tribulations and things we have to toil over, but at the end of the day, on our tiny little blip of eternity, those toiling moments are a tiny blip within our lifespan. I'm someone who likes to think optimistic. I like to think that everything is working together through God and will work out in the end. And sometimes that's very hard for us to see. Like I specifically remember when the Australian fires were happening, a friend of mine who was from Sydney and another who's living in the States and another friend of mine who's from the States who's now living in Sydney, watching the stress that Nick was going through, not being able to be at home with his family, and watching the soot and the air quality in Sydney and how bad it was for Taylor, and to experience two sides of it and the helplessness of one side and the nerves of the other. That the fires are pretty far away from the capital of Sydney, or the city of Sydney, but at the same time, like Taylor was having to wear masks before we had to for the pandemic. She was wearing a mask because it was so hard to breathe. They were saying, don't really go outside if you don't have to. And in California, we know what that's like, right? But this brush fire was the first time in decades that this has happened to Australia. And so in those moments, those are those toiling moments where Nick has to keep going to his job every day, even though his family is experiencing what Taylor's experiencing. And Taylor still has to go to work every day, even though it looks like the end of the world around her. We are given a blip on a timeline, and our blip has blips of toil. But I can tell you that those blips of toil, sometimes when we have these moments, we can remember the blessings that were along with it. I remember when they announced we were going home from Lake Avenue and going to be working from home, that Sarah, Josh, and I were joking around. We're like, all right, see you in 2 weeks, tee-hee-hee. And then we didn't see each other for like 2 months. No joke. I remember within those 2 weeks that we thought, it's only going to be this long. We were Zooming all the time. Like we would do work and just Zoom together. We were like just sending texts back and forth and laughing. And then things got super real and we realized, oh my gosh, we aren't going back in the office for a while. Okay. And that was the moment where radio silence basically for a few weeks. And then we had to kind of get used to this new normal. And I treasure those moments of joy because the toil that came afterwards was exhausting. Don't get me wrong. It was very tiring. But I still hold on to those silly moments when we would Zoom after staff meetings, when we would just be texting things throughout the day. And it's kind of nice because now that we're back into a pattern of like, this is our new normal. And that's not the end of the world. We're safe. We are healthy, we still have jobs, we still get to spend time with our students, regardless of how that is, we still get to spend time with you. We're doing pretty good in the grand scheme of things, you know? So we're going back to sending TikToks to each other. We're going back to like just talking every day for random moments. And these are beautiful things. And those are those God moments where God never promised our lives would be easy. God never promised that our lives would come without hiccups or moments of toil, but God did promise blessings. God is always working and moving, and there will be times of absolute beauty. And those times will be perfectly timed. But then there are going to be moments where there's absolute heartbreak, like the fires in Australia. Best friend Rach, her dad passed away really suddenly in March. It's been a hard year to walk alongside someone that I love so dearly, experience a loss so deep. Just to experience loss in general when it comes to the pandemic, whether it's loss of life and supporting our family and our friends around us, we're experiencing it ourselves, The loss of school and our routines. That is really hard to take in. The loss of, I don't know, I feel like it's the best words I can think of is what feels like reality. You've kind of lost that because this doesn't feel like reality. But the one thing that has stayed the same throughout all of this, whether you've come to every single Sunday or you've only come to some, the reality is that God is still working in our lives every day. God is reminding us we are loved every single day. And God is asking us to share that love with people we encounter every single day. I have loved 2020 with you. When we talk next week, Josh and I will have officially been working at Lake Avenue for 1 full year. Bananas! I have been so thankful for 2020. It has taught me some really, really hard lessons that I would rather have not learned that way. But at the same time, 2020 has taught me how deep the love of God is, how beautiful the sacrifice of Jesus is, and how blessed I am with my amazing students, my wonderful friends, and my incredible family. You all are a blessing, and I hope you remember to share that blessing with others, because when one door closes, God opens another. You're seen, you are loved, and you are needed. We'll see you next week. Toodles!